So in 2011, a group formed to do an RFP to find a replacement tool. The replacement tool that was chosen is called Secure Dock by WinMagic. Despite the name, it works with Mac too. I really wish it was a different name, but we piloted that with various campuses, other groups, units. Commonwealth campuses were really some of the first ones to buy in. It's incredibly hard to get anybody that wants to pilot encryption, it seems. Everybody just says, yeah, well, when you get that working in production, we'll join in. But nobody really wants to beta test encryption for you. I can't blame them. SecureDoc met a lot of the key criteria that we were looking for in a tool. And now in 2013, it went into production. 2014, here we are. The key criteria that we looked at had to have Windows and Mac support. And it did have Mac support when we got the product, so it wasn't another one of these, oh yeah, it'll come, we'll get there. It was there. Password recovery, the ability to organize units. Since Penn State is such a decentralized IT environment, we needed a way to logically structure those units to give people access into only their own devices. A couple other things, removable media encryption, file and folder encryption, something that was capable of Active Directory integration. With that being said, our console is not integrated into Active Directory because it can only talk with one AD. And since most campuses, colleges, units use their own Active Directory, we don't really have a good way to do that. Down the road, if there is a more centralized Penn State Active Directory, that's something that we'd revisit. But we'll talk about a lot of things that we've been able to do to kind of overcome some of the obstacles that for the lack of AD integration presents for us. Obviously, it needed to have good recovery procedures, like any encryption product should have. Needed to be scalable, something we can start off small, ramp up as the demand comes in. And then the ability to have multiple users per device. That's something that we didn't find with every encryption tool. The important piece there is so that your unit admins can have access to all devices for doing support, troubleshooting, etc. And then you can have user accounts with just normal user level privileges on those devices also.
Okay, so real quick, just to again go over the process overview, which some of you may have seen this information already, so we're just going to go through it quickly. And again, a lot of units are already in the console and are starting to use it, but we only really have one unit that has been using it heavily, but a lot of units are in there and doing some testing. So we expect that with the minimum security baselines, which we're going to talk about, that more units will start to use the product more heavily in the near future. But basically, when you sign up, if you haven't already, you would, the process is you would get the package, you would download the package, depending on if it's Mac or Windows, install it on the machine. And the good thing about the console communication is you don't really have to have a VPN client connection with it. You could have on any internet connection the machine can be on. It will be able to check in with the console. So that's a nice feature that we have set up for you. So basically, you're going to install it. It's going to check in with the console. It's going to upload the device key to the console right away. And then when you're in the console, you will be able to see the status of the device. So you'll be able to see how it's encrypting. If it's not encrypted yet, you'll also be able to see some basic, very basic device information. Also, that's from the console. Then you'll be able to manage your users and devices and export key files, whatever else you would need to do. This gives you a screenshot of what the console looks like. So it's you'll see a very simplistic view of this. There are many, many units in there already, but you will only see your own particular unit folders. And within your unit, in this case, you look under SOS, you can see there are 3 folder structures within there: admins, Autoboot, users, or devices. So the admins folder is that's the one where we're going to populate that with the administrator accounts for your unit. So when you sign up for this, if you haven't done that, we'll create some administrative accounts for you so that you can get into the console and do your administration. Those would be underneath that folder. The Autoboot folder, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, but really you're not going to need to do anything in there, but that's going to house one particular account depending on the type of profile that you would use for your devices. That key would be housed in that folder. So most of your time you would spend in the users or devices folder. And that's where all of the user accounts that you might create individually for your users or the devices that you encrypt are all going to show up underneath that particular folder. You will have the ability to generate recovery media for the device if you need to. We'll talk about that, but we really haven't had a need to do that. And now Kyle, we're going to talk a little bit about features.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add to what Chris said. We do get a lot of people who sign up for it. We create their, set their unit admin accounts up, create the structure and stuff for them, and then we don't see really any devices get populated in there. So that's kind of like that next step. That's kind of like a hurdle to take after you're in it to actually get stuff put in there. We'll work with you on that if you're kind of not sure where to start. We have a wiki that we'll look at in the resources that we have good information in. But if you're reading through it and you're kind of lost, don't know what to do, let us know. Because that's something that we need to adjust on our side to get you guys the information that you need. So a couple things here that I wanted to point out as features of SecureDoc, kind of some things that make it unique from other encryption tools. The first one being File Vault 2 support. When we first started using the product, WinMagic had two different ways to encrypt a Mac. First one being their own native or their own installer with their own algorithm that put their own software on there and encrypted it. The problem with that is, the problem that any encryption vendor has with that is when Apple releases an update, it has the possibility of bricking that machine. So what they came up with, and actually the only way that they do it now, is to integrate with File Vault 2. So the first thing you would do is you install a WinMagic installer that we generate for you, like Chris said. You then encrypt your device as normal with File Vault, and then your keys get pushed back up to the console. So it's really File Vault on the device, the same way that your users are familiar with, but you have the key stored centrally in the console that you can manage. And like I said, that's the only way that they do it now. Apple requested that WinMagic not play around in their Preboot environment anymore. So we're working with the File Vault 2 stuff. Done some testing with it. We're hoping next week to have everybody's File Vault 2 profiles ready to go and put some more information out there on that. The second one, self-encrypting drives, are completely supported by SecureDoc, which we highly recommend. If you can afford to put them in your devices, they're absolutely the way to go with encryption. Makes the process real easy on your IT staff. Once you install the SecureDoc client, which on a self-encrypting drive, takes a minute, it flips that bit in the drive to turn on encryption, manages the key in the console. You don't have to sit and wait for software encryption. If you're going to do an OS upgrade, you don't have to wait for the software decryption to happen. You just flip that bit back. Really the way to go if you can do it. And then finally, like we said before, we have to have good recovery options. WinMagic has, right from the console, you can create a recovery disk for the bootloader. If something goes bad in the bootloader, you can restore that from a recovery disk. And these are all things that we've tested with WinMagic. Gone through it. It's worked well. WinPE plugins, they have their own set of plugins that you can build right into your own WinPE disk. That way you can load key files in through WinPE if something happened to the OS and you can't access it. And then you can always connect your drive to another machine with SecureDoc installed, load the key file onto that device and be able to access that drive. So they have a good list of recovery options. Testing them all, like I said. Hopefully we don't have a widespread need for them. So,
Kyle, you have a question.
I got a question.
Any recommendations on self-encrypting drive models?
There is, I think we have a link on our wiki. SecureDoc tests certain models and puts out a list of their approved models. Basically, the guidelines that it follows is any Opal approved self-encrypting drive. If you have a particular drive that you're looking at, you can let us know and we'll talk to WinMagic, or you can email support@winmagic.com with your drive and they'll tell you if that's supported or not supported. But the last thing that I heard from them, really, if it's an Opal compliant drive, it's supported. So we will talk about Autoboot versus Preboot. This pertains to the way that Secure Dock functions when you install it on the machine. And you can install it in two different ways. This really now is only on the Windows side. Autoboot uses a special account that we create for your unit. It stores it on the device. It bypasses your typical pre-boot authentication that you would see with products like TrueCrypt or BitLocker. Usually you have that first set of credentials for the encryption you put in, then that passes you to your Windows login, you put in those credentials and you're in the system. Autoboot we implemented to try to get people to come in who were concerned that they don't have AD integration, therefore they don't have single sign-on, their users have to remember another password. That's not true with Autoboot. Autoboot has the security feature of you can set it so that at a number of failed logins to the operating system, it locks the device out. So 10 failed OS logins will lock the device out. Ideally, that's going to be used in the case where somebody stole the device. We recommend that for lower risk devices. And again, it is a balance between security and usability. It has all the same features that a normal full disk encryption tool would. When the device is off, when you power it on, if you boot it to a Linux CD, you're not going to be able to get anywhere because it has to pass through that auto boot portion of the bootloader first. The opposite of that, pre-boot authentication, that's what you would see in your TrueCrypt, where you're going to set another set of credentials that the user has to enter to be able to access the device. Additional password, extra security. We would recommend that for devices that higher risk, they travel more frequently in airports, things like that.
Kyle, you have another question?
Okay.
This one is, do these options work with UEFI boot?
So that's an excellent question, actually. On UEFI boot systems, the way that it works now is you have to set your BIOS to go to legacy boot. Not all devices have that option. I would expect that WinMagic is going to deal with this in a next release or the next few releases of the product, because that's kind of a big issue. Right now we're on 6.2. There's a 6.3 limited release, and then we're going to go to 6.4, which is going to be in March or April. So I can try to get some information on that and put out to the list if UEFI devices are going to be handled better. Also, if you have a Lenovo device, Lenovo's have things called Secure Boot that you have to disable for a pre-boot or auto boot to work. We do cover that in the wiki. There's more information there if you're deploying Lenovo devices. That was a really good question.
One more question.
Yep.
Can you do challenge response for users that forget their passwords, or is that not applicable in this scenario?
You can do challenge response. So if my laptop's a pre-boot laptop, let's say I go to enter my password, whatever reason I forgot it, I can hit, I believe the command's F8 right at the pre-boot screen. It brings up a challenge code. Your unit admins then would enter that challenge code into the console. A response code's generated. Read it over the phone. However, the user types that code in. They're logged into the system, and then they're prompted to change their Secure Dock password. Now, we are trying to work with the service desk to get that sort of managed at that level so that it doesn't have to be at the unit level. The problem that we're running into there is how do we vet the user, and that problem is not unique to this product. That's a larger discussion at the university, so that's something that we're trying to work in here too.
All right, we're going to switch gears just a little bit to the SelfExtractor. And if you're used to the private crypto product, which was the standalone client that you may have used to just encrypt a file or a particular folder or a couple files and send that off to someone for secure communication to transmit it, this is the replacement for that. We no longer had the licensing for that, so we couldn't get updates. And now the SelfExtractor, which is the WinMagic product that replaces that, is available on downloads. If for some reason you still have some files out there encrypted with private crypto and you don't have the application anymore, you can always email security and we can get you access to it. But at this point going forward, you should really be using the SelfExtractor for everything. Again, it's available on downloads and it's pretty simple to use. The recipient, one of the nice things is whoever you're sending the file to, they really don't need to have this product installed. Okay, it's just a self-executable or a cab file. So if you need to email it, the only difference between the self-extracting cab and the exe file is that a lot of email programs may catch the exe file, flag that as a potential virus, and block it. So that way you have this other option to actually encrypt it as a cab file and send it. But basically, you would send that off to them and get them the decrypt password in some other means, and then they can go ahead and run that, put the password in, and they don't need any product installed to do that. This right now is just for Windows-only machines, which private crypto is also the same way. And it's, as I said, it's a pretty simple interface to use. And it also comes on you can install it separately if you want on a machine that does not have Secure Dock installed, or any machine that you do encrypt with full disk encrypt with Secure Dock, it is part of that application installation process, so you would have it on there automatically. Any questions with SelfExtractor?
There was a question about use on Macs. I think you covered that. And there was a question that came in about passwords again. And that one was, how do password changes work? Does the encryption software sync with whatever you're using LDAP for authentication?
So we don't sync with anything. I mean, in terms of like an external LDAP or anything. It's just the accounts are Secure Dock accounts that get set up for the users. The way a password change works, I mean, if it's outside that challenge response, there's what's called the Secure Dock Control Center that gets installed on the machine, and a user can change their password from that application at any time. Once the password's changed there, it syncs back up to Secure Dock as soon as it's done.
Okay, then you have another question about the extractor. Is there an advantage of the SelfExtractor over using 7-zip encryption options?
It's really your preference. I mean, if you choose to use 7-zip, that's fine. It's just, we just want to make everybody aware that the SelfExtractor is available. They're both fine tools. So it's really preference. A lot of users, again, if you start using this product more, you will have it already on the machine. So it's one less application you might need to use when you're referring to 7-zip. But that's, again, personal preference. All right, so if you are not involved at this point and you're looking to get involved, what do you need to do? We have some links here for the wiki spaces, and we want you to go ahead and review the MOU. There are other instructions up there. We have a lot of documentation up there. It's ever-changing. We're constantly trying to update that for any new releases or any additional things that we're testing out. If you see anything as you're using this, see any documentation that's confusing, just let us know, because we want to try to make that as best we can so it's more informative for everybody. And essentially what you will do then is create a ticket for your unit, and there's some information that we would be looking for, such as the unit name, a couple of the administrators that you would want to have for your unit, etc. And all that information is available on the wiki. It explains exactly what we need in that ticket. We do have a web form available both for getting admins into getting your unit set up, as well as for other things. We try to encourage everyone to use the web form if you're looking to us for support. And again, you will have a Windows Autoboot Preboot installers whenever we set your unit up, as well as a File Vault installer for Macs. And in talking about support, again, you're going to probably reach out to us for most of your support needs. If you need to get access, if you're looking to add more unit admins, general service questions, any sort of problems you might have with the console itself, you're probably going to want to open up a ticket with us. Again, we have web forms available. If you email us directly, we will still help you, but we try to encourage everybody to use the web form, because then that goes directly into our ticketing system in the format that we can see it quickly and more efficiently work with you. You can also go to WinMagic for support, though, if you have some sort of major hardware issue. Now, again, we haven't seen that yet, but that's not to say it can't happen. But if you have some particular issue, you may need to go directly to them, in which case you do have that capability. You can just email them, or you can go to their website and create a ticket, or you can call them. They do have 24/7 support. Question?
Can a Windows machine be decrypted?
Can a Windows machine be decrypted? Sure. Any machine that you encrypt with this product, you can decrypt. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they were asking, but yes.
One more. Do we know a time frame for Mac OS X 10.9 support?
Yes, it should be available right now. We are going to be testing that actually tomorrow. We have some plans to make sure that that's working out well, and we're going to update the documentation. But we are told that the support for Mavericks is available right now with what we have. Okay, so other resources. Again, we mentioned the wiki space. So that's going to be your first stop when you're looking for information on the product. And if you're looking for ways to do things, we try to document as much as we can in there. Whenever you sign up for getting your unit in here, we will add you to our Yammer group, Secure Document Encryption Yammer group. So we encourage that for general questions, community questions, to work through that space. And also we have a listserv set up where we were going to use that for major maintenance announcements, things like that, but we are considering just doing away with that and using the Yammer group for all of our communications in that regard. And as I said before, WinMagic, you can go directly to WinMagic. You can use their knowledge base. You can create your own account on their site and use that if you need to, or submit a ticket through them, email them, or call phone support. Question?
Another question? Is this available for other units to install on their own console and use Active Directory?
It is available, sure, yes, but that unit has to, obtain the license for the console and database. And if you're using your own console and your own database, then you have to purchase client licenses from WinMagic. So yeah, you can go to WinMagic and you can basically replicate everything that we've done here, but there is going to be a fee associated with that for all the products.
So what are we doing right now? File folder encryption, removable media, those are things that are available. We do actually have a couple of units that are testing those sort of case uses with us right now, and it seems to be working out well. We are also doing more testing in that space, so we plan to have the documentation in the wiki updated soon with those areas, so that when some unit wants to jump in there, we'll have more concrete details on what you need to do. iOS and Android probably going to be a little bit further out, but that is on the horizon for us to do some testing there also. All right.
I'll jump back. I picked that testing in progress image, and I just realized it's really terrible because it says "Do not disturb." Yeah, we don't mean that. Please disturb us. Please ask questions. I'm going to delete that off the next one. All right. Something else before we jump into this section, which is really going to cover the minimum security baseline part of it. One thing I did forget to mention, when I talked with WinMagic yesterday about the 6.4 release, they gave me an idea of what some of the features were with that. And one of the features that they said was the ability to integrate with BitLocker. And I tried to get some more information as to what that meant, and they could not give me that information. I think the person I was talking to just didn't have it with them. So to me, probably what that means is something very similar to how FileVault works. You'll be able to install a WinMagic client, turn BitLocker on the device, and then it'll send that key back to the console. Now, obviously, you might be doing your own BitLocker with your own Active Directory. And that's something that we want to point out, too. If you're doing encryption, you like the way you're doing it, and it works for you, that's fine. This is just being put out there by SOS for people who want to use something that's already stood up, ready to go, and can jump into it pretty quickly. Okay. So, why would you want to do this? Like I said, license costs are covered in the central instance of it. If you do your own instance, then that's your own licensing. One less service for you to have to worry about, and the keys are stored centrally. So you know where everything's at. If for whatever reason something happens to a device, user can't get into it, you can go to the web console, you can get that key, you can access the device. I've worked in units that have had TrueCrypt before. Usually we had a stack of CDs with TrueCrypt keys burned onto them, and that's just a little bit scarier way to go. Obviously, data protection, cover against lost or stolen devices. You also could want to encrypt desktops located in high traffic areas, insecure areas, think reception areas, think suites with a reception in there and then offices inside that. There are places where it's perfectly acceptable that you would want to do a desktop also. And then obviously for compliance reasons, and this is where we're going to get minimum security baseline, satisfy audit, satisfy MSB. Question?
How are the keys protected?
So the keys, all traffic between the client and the console is encrypted. The keys are stored within the database. The database is encrypted. It's end-to-end, really, encryption with the product. Yep.
Does WinMagic do cloud encryption?
There is no cloud option with WinMagic. Another question we've had before is email. They don't do anything with email either. It's full disk, and they focus on removable media. Really, it's storage is what they focus on. Hopefully that answers those. All right. So with that, we're going to talk minimum security baseline. In the minimum security baseline, category 5 deals with encryption. I'm going to try not to read this stuff word for word because I know you guys can read. But the first item under category 5 is 5.1. Sensitive data will be encrypted wherever it resides. And the way that we want to look at this is in conjunction with the MSB, can SecureDoc cover these requirements? So when it comes down to you guys having to meet this document, can you use the SecureDoc tool, implement it, use it, and say, yes, I know that I'm covered across this section 5. So that's what we're going to address here. So full disk encryption will be used to prevent recovery in the event of desktop or laptop theft when such technology is supported by the OS. File encryption for non-public files must be used in any case where full disk encryption is not possible. Obviously, 5.1 is met by the fact that it's an encryption tool. It can do full disk encryption, and it can do file and folder encryption. I don't think we have to spend a whole lot of time on that one, but if you have questions on any of this stuff, we'll be happy to answer it. 5.1.2, individual file encryption will be used excuse me, as an alternative to individual file encryption on a server. File or folder level permissions may be implemented to protect online files that are not open but in use that reside on the hard drive of the active machine. Covered by SecureDoc. In addition to full disk encryption, you can layer file and folder encryption on that if you want to. And there are reasons why you may want to do that. But you can use both of them in conjunction together. I'm going to do 5.1.3 and then we'll pause and see if there's any questions on this before we jump to the next one. Server class machines that are professionally administered and physically secured, data at rest need not be encrypted. Mechanisms must exist to prevent unauthorized disclosure of the data between user accounts and or sessions. We say satisfied by SecureDoc, but again, what this one's really dealing with is if it's a server that's locked up in a secure room, card swiped, you don't have to have encryption there. I mean, that's compensating controls, I believe is the term for that. So satisfied by SecureDoc. Chris will jump in.
Yep, and one caveat with that is obviously a lot of servers are typically network accessible. So if you do have restricted sensitive data on the server that needs protected, obviously maybe full disk encryption is not something you may want to consider or be able to do on a server, but you can certainly implement file folder encryption. We have been doing that in some cases and it seems to be working out well. So as you're starting to go through this process of the minimum security baselines in your area, that's one thing to think about is if you do have that server accessible spaces, file folder encryption is an option for you to satisfy that requirement.
Next question, what types of policies are set as standard? Are there policies for units to set, i.e. state of encryption during sleep, for example?
I mean, a lot of that, and I might need some clarification on the question, but Secure Dock and the OS in that case, it's really more up to the OS as to what happens. I mean, if on a full disk encrypted device, as soon as you log into it through whether it be Preboot or Autoboot authentication, the device is unlocked. So if the device goes to sleep, when it comes back out of sleep, hopefully your group policy or whatever prompts for a password and login. But as long as that device is on and past the Autoboot or Preboot stage, it's an unencrypted device. That's really all I can come up with there. I mean, if you have something more specific that you want, let us know. But I mean, this isn't a real policy-driven product, and by policy I mean something that you can set within the software. There's some options for the way that self-encrypting drives handle going in and coming out of sleep, but it's not something that there's like a baseline policy for that you have to meet. I mean, we come up with the settings for the way that this is going to work within the installation profile and the package, but most of that stuff is really just the Secure Dock defaults. Hopefully that answers that. If not, we can go into more.
It did answer his question. And the next question is, can you whitelist external drives such as excuse me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, SATA ESATA drives?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something that we haven't looked at a whole lot, but it is something that the product can do. It can do it a couple different ways. The one that I've looked at is doing it by device ID, the actual ID of that device. You can go in and you can allow access to that drive, or you can say don't ever use these drives. Where I think something like that comes in handy is like a flash drive. If your unit has one particular flash drive, a blue verbatim, and it gets encrypted by IT staff with a group key, that's the only flash drive that you want to allow use in your enterprise and your devices are encrypted, then you can set the product up so that it only allows Windows to access that encrypted drive, nothing else.
One more question. Mark says, I guess another policy question might be if a flash drive gets inserted, encrypt the drive.
That is an option. That is one thing that we do not turn on by default, but that is something that can be turned on within the profile. Any external media that gets plugged in gets automatically encrypted before it gets used. That's a good question. These are all really good questions.
And just one add-on to the category that's up on the screen is you also want to think about, at a minimum, you should have the compensating controls in there of file and folder permissions set for user accounts, right? And then the add-on to that is with minimum security baselines is the encryption part of the file folder encryption when you have restricted data. Any questions on that yet before we jump to the next category? Or the next section of category 5?
Yep. All right, so the next one, 5.2, sensitive data will be strongly encrypted when transmitted over local or wide area networks. So this is really talking about something outside of what Secure Dock is meant to do. Like I said before, WinMagic's focus is really storage. It's not, network encryption, anything like that. But that doesn't mean that that's not something that our office would be willing to talk to you about if you have questions. I mean, obviously, if you need more information, SSL, IPsec, VPNs, I mean, contact the security office, and we have people that will certainly work with you to deal with any questions that you might have in that space. But satisfied by Secure Dock in this case is a no.
And just to add on to that, one of the things that we are working on in the office is we are coming up with a list of resources and best practices that you can use to cover all of these requirements. So in this example, Secure Dock doesn't satisfy this one, but there are other things that do. So we're going to come up with those lists. We're not really focusing on those yet today because we still need to flush some of that out, but we will be providing those sorts of resources and best practices to you for all of the minimum security baseline categories going forward.
Okay. And we'll look at the next one, 5.2.2. Sensitive communications will be encrypted. Sensitive communications may include email, attachments, text, fax, etc. Compensating controls may include network segregation. So this is a star with an asterisk, and really the star or the check mark is, yeah, we can encrypt some of that stuff in terms of email with the SelfExtractor tool. You know, attachments, whatever. You can, like Chris talked about with the SelfExtractor, exe or cab, and the data in the email will be encrypted. The email itself won't be encrypted. Again, SecureDoc doesn't focus on that. So we can somewhat cover this with SecureDoc, but not all of it. So one thing at the bottom, tentatively scheduled is an IT roundtable. That is a 2-hour session. I know you're all excited. You like 2 hours of encryption. So that's going to be April 29th at 1 o'clock. If that changes, you'll hear about it through various listservs, I'm sure. But Chris and I are really going to try to get into the console, show you what the various options in the console look like. We might look at exporting recovery media. Certainly we'll look at a couple devices that we have in there and show you what information is available in the console. If you have anything that you want to see, I mean, certainly shoot us an email, send us a ticket. All your questions really kind of help drive what we put into these presentations. I mean, and this one's been really good so far in terms of the questions that we got. I think we have a question. Do we have a question? 2 questions, so we'll do the questions.
First question, does WinMagic support Linux operating systems? If not, are there any plans to do so?
That's another good question. So good. So they support Linux operating systems only through self-encrypting drives. And they have what's called an OS agnostic agent that does that. So yes, you can encrypt your Linux systems, but you can only do it if those systems have a self-encrypting drive. I believe either right before or as soon as we got the product, they did have a Linux client, but they had to get away from that just because of all the various Linux versions and kernel changes and things. So they only support it now through the self-encrypting drive and an OPAL compliant self-encrypting drive.
Next question, once encrypted, can you share external drives between users?
Yeah, so we set this up. We worked with a unit to set up what we think worked out really well for them. Basically, we encrypted a USB device with SecureDoc, and we encrypted that with a group key that we created that is unique to this small unit. From there, we built them installation packages that did not do full disk encryption on their drives because they didn't need that. They only stored the sensitive data on this USB drive. So in the client that we installed, we built that group key into it. So any machine that they installed that client on that you plug this encrypted USB drive into reads it. And it does it, it's completely transparent to the user when you do it like that with the group keys. I mean, you plug it in, Windows shows it up as a device letter. There's no, you don't see any SecureDoc, functions happening. Obviously, we take that drive. If we took it over to our office and plugged it into Chris's machine, we're not going to see any of that data because we don't have that key assigned to our machine. So, there are other really good ways to use the client that don't necessarily involve encrypting the drive that it's installed on. You might just want to use it for a situation like that. And that's something that, again, worked out really good for them. And that was, a good win because that data was just sitting on a drive unencrypted and they were just passing it around between machines. So there's a lot of really good uses for the tool. Okay. So any other questions? Like I said, we want to do this console demo. Let us know what it is that you guys want to see. I'm sure a lot of you out there are already in the console. If you're in the console, you don't know something about a specific area of it, let us know and we'll try to cover that in our presentation. Like I said, it is 2 hours, so it'll be 2 hours of pure fun. Anything in general, questions, we'll take any questions via tickets, email. I wrote down a couple things of the questions that you guys asked to make sure that we have it added to our documentation. They're really good, really good things to think about. We'll kind of hang out here if anybody on Adobe has anything.
One person is typing. I'll see if anything comes up.
We're gonna. It can be shared. Yeah. I mean. Hmm. Yeah. No. We'll.
I think if and I may be incorrect here, but I believe all the Security Series sessions are recorded, and once they incorporate the captioning and things like that, then they make it available for everybody. Oh, just the PowerPoint? Oh, okay. Sure, no problem. Sorry.
And one thing I want to jump back to on the Yammer real quick. When you join, we automatically add you to our Yammer. It is a closed group. If you're not in the console, you just kind of want to see what's going on, we'll add you. You can come in and ask questions. That's not a problem. So don't let the fact that it's a closed group scare you off. Anything else? I think we've covered everything encryption-wise. If not, thank you. Hopefully you found this useful. Questions, comments, certainly let us know. We'd be happy to answer them for you. Thanks.